As the 2023 NFL season has now come to a close, we thought that we would take a look back at the 2013 season to see how different the sport looked a decade ago. 2013 was stocked full of fascinating storylines, from medical emergencies and bullying in the locker room to Peyton Manning's record-breaking effort. It truly had it all. Here's the story of the 2013 NFL season. The 2013 season was a time of significant change in the NFL. Fresh off of their Super Bowl success, the Baltimore Ravens would be defending their title with a severely depleted side thanks to 8 of their starting defensive players leaving the team. This list was headlined by stars such as Ed Reed and Ray Lewis. Their opponents in that Super Bowl game, the San Francisco 49ers, who had just embarked on a major change themselves, committing to exciting dual-threat quarterback Colin Kaepernick as the face of their franchise. The young quarterback had entered the previous season as a backup, but after shining in his first on-field action and leading the team to the big game, he was made the starter heading into 2013. Kaepernick's dual-threat ability was much less common back in 2013. Yes, Robert Griffin had taken the league by storm, and Michael Vick was still going strong, but the best quarterbacks in the NFL at the time were pure pocket passers. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Drew Brees were some of the hottest names on the block, leading to the passing yardage statistics that dwarf those that we see today. For example, the Dallas Cowboys' league-leading 265 passing yards per game in 2023 would only be good enough for 6th best in 2013. That total falls well behind the 337 yards per game put up by Denver and the 303 yards per game put up by New Orleans in 2013. Now, whilst pure pocket passers appear to be a dying breed in 2023, they were the cream of the crop 10 years earlier, and what a season they gave us. Now, in the offseason in the lead up to the 2013 season, several teams were shaking things up a little bit to see if they could muster up some more talent and just better prospects for the upcoming year. Fresh off of a 2-14 disaster season, the Kansas City Chiefs decided to do a complete overhaul. Andy Reid was the coach of choice, donning the Kansas City Red after 14 years in Philadelphia. He was joined by quarterback Alex Smith, who needed a new home after Colin Kaepernick's startling emergence in San Francisco. And the Andy Reid-shaped hole in the Eagles head coaching chair was filled by Chip Kelly.
A few were shocked, a couple of people was like, what, he's leaving? But nobody was fully surprised to the point where they were just completely upset and distraught about it.
An intriguing option who would bring them an exciting, fast-paced college-style offense. This was a tantalizing prospect for fans who were excited to see what he could do with the likes of Michael Vick, Deshaun Jackson, and LaShawn McCoy. Percy Harvin was another big name on the move, transitioning from Minnesota to Seattle. Seahawks fans were already excited by the performance of their rookie quarterback Russell Wilson, and the signing of Harvin led many to believe that this could be the year that Seattle could reclaim their spot atop the NFC West. Back in the AFC though, Wes Welker's surprise move produced elation for Denver and headaches for New England. The Broncos were delighted to have pinched the Patriots' leading receiver in 2012 for multiple reasons. You see, Peyton Manning at the time was bolstering only a 9-11 playoff record, and this move greatly bolstered his wide receiver corps and led the Broncos to becoming the league-leading betting odds favorites to make the Super Bowl. The move also took away a key receiver and key target for Tom Brady. The loss of Welker was then compounded by the departure of the team's second best receiver, Brandon Lloyd, and the release of Aaron Hernandez, who was arrested for murder during the summer. This left very little for Tom Brady to aim for, which would become a very closely watched headline throughout this season. The Patriots weren't the only AFC East team to watch a key player head for the door. The New York Jets traded cornerback Darrelle Revis to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. At the time, Revis was a 3-time All-Pro and widely considered the best cornerback in the league. One of the more controversial points of that season, though, was all the conversation around James Harrison before the 2013 season, who was released by the Steelers because of contract negotiations that ended up falling through. He was a key part of the Pittsburgh defense and had won the Defensive Player of the Year award in 2008. Despite being 35, Harrison still gained lots of interest from NFL teams before opting to join the Steelers' bitter rivals, the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, in all honesty, the 2013 NFL draft wasn't really littered with that much offensive talent. The Kansas City Chiefs had the #1 overall selection, and after just getting a new head coach and a new quarterback, they thought it was the best idea to go and get a new left tackle to protect their new quarterback. Eric Fisher was the selection, becoming only the second offensive tackle to be taken #1 overall since 1998. And as crazy as it sounds, EJ Manuel was the first quarterback taken coming off of the board at number 16 by the Buffalo Bills. He was then followed by Geno Smith and Mike Glennon as the only other quarterbacks to be selected in the first 3 rounds. And as I stated before, the draft in 2013 did not have the same firepower on offense, but it did see DeAndre Hopkins go late in the first, along with Le'Veon Bell and Eddie Lacy in the second round, before Travis Kelce was taken in the 5th. On the defensive side of the ball, Xavier Rhodes, Darius Slay, and Tyrann Mathieu were all taken in the first 3 rounds. Now, while the draft was going on, yes, of course, there were many other storylines that were just as big. Considering the things of the likes of the arrest of Aaron Hernandez was a huge storyline for the New England Patriots and the NFL, completely dominating the build-up to the season. In an effort to distance themselves from the convicted tight end, New England allowed fans to trade in their Hernandez jersey in the lead-up to the season.
Not critically important, it's just a statement that we don't support murderers and gangbangers.
He would then be convicted and sentenced to life in prison 2 years later.
Is the defendant not guilty? Guilty of murder in the 1st degree or guilty of murder in the 2nd degree?
Guilty of murder in the 1st degree.
Returning to action in the NFC was surprisingly a head coach, Sean Payton, who would be back on the sideline after his 1-year suspension due to his Bountygate scandal. The health of Washington's sophomore quarterback was also a hot topic of conversation. He was electric as a rookie, winning Offensive Rookie of the Year, but an ACL tear in the playoffs raised health concerns heading into the new year. And yet again in the courts, the NFL suffered a big loss as they were forced to settle a concussion suit for $765 million.
And few realize that the most devastating scars were behind many of those famous faces. Countless concussions led to an historic settlement today.
This came as part of a case brought against the NFL, accusing them of concealing what they knew about the dangers of repeated hits to the head.
So by settling, have you let them off the hook?
No, unless somebody thinks paying $760 million is letting somebody off the hook, then by that definition, yeah, but we didn't. $760 million is real money. It's going to be used immediately to care for the players who are most injured and to get medical testing and treatment for the large percentage of the group. So we think we did something pretty amazing.
For fans who wanted to recreate the on-field drama, Madden 25 and NCAA 14 were released in the second half of 2013. That ended up being the last version of the college game to be released, featuring Michigan running back Denard Robinson on the cover. But now on to the on-field action. The 49ers, Broncos, and Seahawks started this season as the top 3 teams in most power rankings, and they all started hot. The Broncos preseason hype came good immediately as Peyton Manning threw a record-breaking 7 touchdowns to down the defending Super Bowl champs by 49 points to just 27. But it wasn't your typical start to the season, as Baltimore became the first team to begin their title defense on the road. It was due to some sort of scheduling clash that they had with the Baltimore Orioles that forced them not to play in Baltimore that game. Week 3, though, brought along a midseason trade that had caught everyone by surprise.
Trent Richardson, who last year broke Jim Brown's team record for rushing yards by a rookie, is being shipped to the Indianapolis Colts. Honestly, I have a hard time saying it.
But despite everybody hyping this up, Richardson would only rush for 458 yards and would really render the trade a bust. Around the same time as this, though, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were enduring turmoil of a much more serious matter.
More serious this morning. They're trying to contain a dangerous outbreak. 3 members of the Bucs have been diagnosed with MRSA, a staph infection that is resistant to many antibiotics. This is what many people are calling, the superbug.
The emergence of the concerning health issue led the NFL to consider canceling their Week 6 clash with the Eagles and encouraged the Falcons to order in a hazardous material crew to disinfect the Bucs locker room after their game in Week 7. Just a short trip south of Tampa Bay too, another high-profile controversy was brewing.
New developments in the NFL hazing case.
Accusations that bullying has reached, of all places, the NFL.
Developments in another big story in professional football. Accusations that a Miami Dolphins player quit because he was bullied by members of his own team.
The Dolphins suspended Incognito yesterday for allegedly harassing and bullying teammate Jonathan Martin over 2 seasons.
Dolphins say they suspended Incognito for, quote, conduct detrimental to the team, end quote.
Based on what multiple sources are saying, the NFL and Dolphins are expected to find repeated examples of bullying and intimidation.
But Incognito lashed back on Twitter, in part saying, "I want my name cleared. Enough is enough."
He was suspended and missed a year and a half of action. Now, while all of this off-the-field drama was going on, many of the fans still had a lot to celebrate on the gridiron. In Week 8, Calvin Johnson erupted for 329 receiving yards and a touchdown. It broke the all-time Detroit Lions record, but he unfortunately was not able to hit the 2,000-yard mark that many people had hoped he would prior to the season. Week 8 was much less fun for Green Bay, though, who watched their star quarterback Aaron Rodgers suffer a season-ending collarbone injury. They went from Super Bowl contenders to a forgotten team, as their backup quarterback could only muster up a 2-4 record to close out the year. 1 week later, Nick Foles became just the second Philadelphia quarterback to throw 7 touchdowns in a game. Injuries to Michael Vick throughout the early stages of the season had hampered the Eagles, and fans feared the worst when the starting role was handed over to Foles. Their concern quickly turned to joy as they watched their backup thrive in Chip Kelly's fast-paced offense. Foles followed up his 7 touchdowns by leading the league in passer rating, throwing for 27 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions, earning himself a Pro Bowl selection. A new star was born in Philly as he and Chip Kelly managed to win the NFC East with a 10-6 record. But in Week 11, the AFC West took center stage as the 9-0 Chiefs took on Peyton Manning and the 8-1 Broncos. I mean, Andy Reid's influence was clear to see from the start, turning Kansas City from a disastrous 2-14 record to 9-0 contenders. Unfortunately, they fell just short in a thrilling 35-28 affair in which Manning threw 5 touchdowns. During that same week, though, Josh Gordon embarked on a 2-week stretch that would etch his name into the history books. With 237 yards in Week 11 and 261 yards in Week 12, Gordon became the first player to record back-to-back games with over 200 receiving yards. It was a dominant season for the troubled wide receiver. After missing his first 2 games, he posted 1,646 yards and 9 touchdowns on just 87 receptions. And just 2 weeks later, another record was broken.
We're going to see an attempt here at an all-time record field goal in NFL history,
as Matt Prater set a new record for the longest field goal in NFL history. His 64-yard kick closed out the first half of Denver's game against Tennessee, which they would go on to win 51-28. And as the season would begin to wind down, in Week 15, it was Jamal Charles's turn to make some history. The running back caught 8 passes for 195 yards and 4 touchdowns, making him the first running back to register 4 scores through the air. He also added 1 more on the ground for good measure. To make the performance even sweeter, it just so happened to come in the fantasy playoffs, making him a true fan favorite. And just as we talked about prior, coming into the season, one of the biggest headlines was the progression of Robert Griffin III in his sophomore season. And despite winning Offensive Rookie of the Year, that knee injury really would linger, and he really would honestly never come around and just didn't really pan out or look good. And due to all of that, Mike Shanahan felt it was necessary to sit him with 3 games remaining. Kirk Cousins came in to finish the season, which was a very underwhelming 3-13 effort. When all was said and done with the 2013 regular season, there was really only one person that we could crown as NFL MVP: Peyton Manning, who threw for an outrageous 55 touchdowns, which set a new all-time single-season record. His Broncos averaged 36.4 points per game, which was almost 10 points higher than the New England Patriots and Kansas City, tied for second place. LaShawn McCoy led all running backs with 1,607 rushing yards, and it was Josh Gordon who took the crown amongst the receivers. His 1,646 yards were over 200 yards better than Antonio Brown in second place. And just when you thought it couldn't get any better, the 2013 playoffs had so much more. Andrew Luck's Indianapolis Colts looked down and out as they fell to a 31-10 deficit in the third quarter. It appeared that Andy Reid was heading for playoff success in his first year as head coach of Kansas City, but a stellar comeback from Luck resulted in a thrilling 45-44 result. It was the second biggest comeback in NFL history in the first ever game to finish with that score. The Eagles also executed a comeback of their own, but sadly they weren't able to cross the finish line and win the game. In their wildcard round clash with the New Orleans Saints, a fateful horse collar tackle gave New Orleans short field in the dying moments. The penalty meant they only needed 34 yards to get into field goal range, which they did, setting up the game-winning score as time expired. And as the Chargers defense led the way in the third matchup of the weekend, their 4 turnovers and 2 stops on fourth down meant that the San Diego Chargers secured a 27-10 win despite being outgained by 439 yards to 319. But as they all say, they saved the best for last, and it featured one of the greatest rivalries we have seen in the past decade between the Packers and Niners in the playoffs. Dual threat quarterback Colin Kaepernick rushed for 98 yards and threw for 227 more, while Phil Dawson's kicking proving to be the deciding factor. But in the divisional round, it was kicked off by the NFC's #1 seeded Seattle Seahawks, whose Legion of Boom defense was in the midst of another epic season. They restricted New Orleans to 0 points in the first 3 quarters, allowing Marshawn Lynch to notch up 140 yards and 2 scores to secure the victory. The Saints honestly threatened to make a comeback, but Marquise Colston's decision not to step out of bounds and instead attempt a lateral would prove fatal. Next was the New England Patriots, who, despite having terrible injury luck during the season, still decided to notch up the 2 seed, which at the time you could still get a bye for. Tom Brady had put together another brilliant season, but it was the running backs who got the job done in the divisional round. 6 rushing touchdowns and a solid defensive effort gave the Patriots a 43-22 victory. Back in the NFC though, the 49ers' reward for beating the Packers was getting a game against the 2-seeded Carolina Panthers. There was a lot of hype around the team given Cam Newton's startling rise to stardom, but they were no match for the 49ers defense. He threw 2 interceptions and was sacked 5 times en route to a 23-10 loss. And how could we have the playoffs without talking about the NFL MVP's team, the Denver Broncos? After scoring at a blistering rate all year long, Denver had to grind their way past a determined San Diego defense. Unfortunately though, the Chargers offense really couldn't produce anything, and the Broncos offense just kind of pushed past them. It was a relatively straightforward 24-17 win for the AFC's top-seeded team. And personally, my favorite weekend of playoff football championship weekend, featuring the 2 best teams from both conferences. On the NFC side, you had the bitter NFC West rivals in San Francisco and Seattle, and on the AFC side, you had the arguably 2 greatest quarterbacks of all time, Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. In the battle of great quarterbacks, it was the league's MVP that got the bragging rights. Manning completed 32 of his 43 pass attempts for 400 yards and 2 scores, whilst the Patriots' injuries finally proved too much to overcome. Brady could only manage 277 yards and 1 touchdown and got very little support from his running backs. And with New England only sitting on 3 points heading into the 4th quarter, Denver honestly really never felt out of position in this game. The game finished 26-16 in the Broncos' favor, making Manning just the 3rd quarterback to reach a Super Bowl for 2 different teams. But in the NFC, it was a completely different story and a much closer affair, with the bitter rivals having to be separated by a line of officials during the warm-ups. There was absolutely no love lost between the Seahawks and the 49ers, and it took the full 60 minutes to find the winner. Colin Kaepernick gashed his opponents with his legs, totaling 130 yards from just his 11 rush attempts. He also threw a touchdown to Anquan Boldin, but it was the Seahawks who got the last laugh. After touchdowns from Marshawn Lynch and Jermaine Kearse gave Seattle the lead, the 49ers got themselves back into the red zone with an opportunity to score the game winner in the dying moments. What followed though is one of the most iconic plays in Seattle Seahawks and I'd even say NFL history.
Kaepernick, end zone, Crabtree, broken up, picked off! This game is over! Knocked in the air, intercepted!
The trash-talking cornerback wasted absolutely no time in bragging about the win either, telling Aaron Andrews one of the best quotes you will ever hear in your life.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game. When you try me with a sorry receiver like Crabtree, that's the result you're gonna get. Don't you ever talk about me.
Who was talking about you?
Crabtree, don't you open your mouth about the best. Or I'm gonna shut it for you real quick. LOB.
That incredible play set up an enticing Super Bowl clash between the Seattle Seahawks and the Denver Broncos, pitching the best defense in the league against the best offense in the league. And unfortunately though, any hype that existed before the game was quickly extinguished. The Broncos' first snap of the game was sent sailing over Peyton Manning's head, resulting in a safety that would initiate one of the most lopsided Super Bowls in NFL history. I mean, after just having one of the greatest seasons possible, Peyton Manning went on to have one of the worst Super Bowl performances we have ever seen, throwing 2 interceptions, and none of his running backs could muster up more than 17 yards on the ground. The Legion of Boom completely dominated the best offense in the league, and Russell Wilson piled on the pressure on offense. He passed for 206 yards and 2 touchdowns, with Marshawn Lynch also finding the end zone. One of the plays of that day came from Percy Harvin too, who would take the second half kick to the house, putting an absolute end to any of the hopes of a Denver comeback. Malcolm Smith went on to be named the Super Bowl MVP, having scored on a 69-yard pick six, recovered a fumble, and made 9 tackles. It was a truly dominant performance, wrapping up one of the most unforgettable NFL seasons.